Hello everybody and welcome back to artofdino.com and saveearth.us. This is Tartarian Tales number 89, and I have a very interesting article called A Court in the Caucasian Mountains, and it's about justice with the Avarians. So again, another Aryan style thing, which meant much mention of the Tartar and the Tartar blood. And these are a people where if you look them up on Google, you will find very little. There's like 3 pictures, which I'll include in this video, that were able to be found online, and then also not too much information even on Wikipedia about these people. So again, they could be that could be on purpose, or it could just be that there's not much that remains here in America, and there's people in Russia and that whole Caucasus, like Georgia, that all know a lot more than we do. But I'd never heard of the Avarians before. It's one of those words kind of like Tartarians that sounds familiar and feels familiar, but I'm not really sure about them. So I'm going to read this, and I'm going to include some imagery that I can find or create using AI that will kind of go with the story. But I found this to be a very interesting article, and it's from the Madisonian, Washington City, Tuesday, May 11th, 1841, translated for the Newark Daily Advertiser, and it takes place in Tiflis, Georgia, the 4th of December, 1840. And again, this is after 60 years after independence in America and all that charade, right around the time of a little before the Civil War and stuff like that. And it just, again, we know nothing about the world or anything at that time. We only know what we've been told and shown in manipulative pictures. So much is up in the air, and so much has to be learned and refigured out, because just the propaganda, the winners of wars, everything just goes into making the truth of our past very tough to discover. So I thought this was, again, very amazing about how the judges and the courts and the criminal kind of system in wars and not in wars kind of was dealt with during this time with these people in an area that we really don't know much about. So it's, again, these articles are awesome. You never know what gems you will find, but this is a gem. So here we go. Tartarian Tales number 89, A Court in the Caucasian Mountains. Enjoy. The tribe of the Avarians is perhaps one of the most numerous and most courageous among the warlike tribes which inhabit the range of the Caucasus. This barbarous people, descended of a pure Mongolian race whose Tartar blood has not been corrupted by any mixture with surrounding nations, has preserved the manners, the customs, and even the superstitions of the ancient subjects of Genghis Khan. Again, that's probably why there's not much information remaining about any of these people in this whole culture. Entrenched in the fur-covered mountains which extend from Dubert to Elbrus, designated in their expressive idiom by the name of the mountain having 7 snowy mains, the Avarians, like the Chechunts, the Loskis, and the Abbasis and other Circassian mountaineers, are engaged in continual hostilities with the Russians, and regard as their principal sources of wealth the booty which they obtain in their predatory excursions, and the prisoners whom they sell commonly to the Kurds, the Armenians, or the Persians. So again, the Russians, like the British, like the Chinese, all seem to kind of come in and just assume control over all these areas that have been going for ancient millennia. So I, again, don't really know the truth, but it always makes me think that these other conquering races came from beyond the realm, and they had they just came with the information they had, so it's very easy to erase their past before that. But then they came and they just seemed to conquer and take over all these things and pollute and bring their communism, bring their government styles, bring all their nonsense, their poisons, their foods, their manipulation of the foods. All this disgusting stuff started coming because you hear so many historical stories about these ancients, these pure ancients, doing all these different things, believing all these different things, and then all of a sudden it changes and turns to the Russia, the China, the British, all controlling everything and being terrible and dumping upon this world and ruining it, to be honest. But here we go, let's keep going. A particular customs which prevails among the Avarians, who, as well as the other mountain tribes, divide the prisoners among themselves at the end of every successful expedition, is this: the prisoners are assembled at one point and remain exposed during 7 suns to the personal inspection of all the members of the tribe, who examine them and address such questions to them as they think proper. On the 8th day, a tribunal consisting of the Khan, who is the presiding judge, and of 6 old men, selected from the most honored and renowned renowned of the tribes, is convened to listen to accusations which may be made against any of the prisoners. The equitable judgments pronounced by this formidable tribunal are executed immediately. If a sentence of death is inflicted upon any of the prisoners, an indemnity is granted to the Avarian who had acquired a property in his person by having periled his own life in his capture. So you'll see here how this law is kind of doing it, and it seems like an old ancient tradition again. And the story you hear is kind of how these guys treated the prisoners during their war. But again, I have a feeling that these guys weren't the ones starting the wars. And that's the big thing. It always seems like the conquering people are the ones creating the wars. That brought the wars into this realm. The brutal wars that really just are for territory and for almost just, who knows, for religion, spirit, all this sake. But I feel like back in at one point, everyone was getting along. Everyone was free to think what they want. And they weren't just constantly waging wars. I like to believe. I know maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like when these bigger countries, these massive countries that still exist today, came into the place, seems like a lot of wars broke out. So I don't really know exactly the truth, again, surrounding all this, but I don't hold these people as the barbarians, because I know that the other side can be disgustingly barbaric as well. So kind of take that into consideration. So here we go. One of these barbarous assizes of the Avarians has recently been held in the forest of Bonjanski, not a court, in the forest, not far from Tiflis, Georgia, the central point of the government of Georgia, whose details have been submitted to us by the Russian journals. On the 10th of June, 1840, a bloody engagement occurred between the Russian troops under Generals Test, Krabi, and Sirojif, and the Circassian tribes united under the command of Shamil Khan, sounds interestingly Hebrew, of the Checheneks, which also sounds actually a little bit like Incan and Aztec, the way it has the TCH. But again, I think they're all connected. Who is now respected as the supreme chief of the Federation of the Mountain Tribes, that's Shamil Khan. The engagement, which took place in the vast plain of Dagestan at the foot of the hills of Souther, lasted from the dawn of day until long after the setting of the sun. The mountaineers, after obtaining a signal advantage over the disciplined troops of the Tsar, regained their inaccessible retreats loaded with booty, and carrying with them numerous prisoners. The Avarians, who on their part had furnished a contingent of 1,000 horsemen to the expedition so ably undertaken by Shamil under the orders of Bati Mira, son of Mendli, their Khan, returned to their tents with 138 prisoners taken from the Russian ranks. They were masters of nature in the mountains. It almost again seems like, these certain tribes that were ancient, they knew the landscape so well. And it always seems like the invading people don't. Like they have the massive disadvantage to no matter what the terrain is, which, I mean, you can be accounted for being the fact that the world is very different all over the place. But also, again, it seems like they're from somewhere else. This evil, I think, came from somewhere else beyond this beautiful realm. A large hut covered with reeds called the Chateau of the Khan is built on a cleared spot in the center of the forest of Bonjnaki, from which the lofty firs and the knotty oaks have been transported by the hands of men or consumed by the agency of fire. It is one of the places of shelter and of halting of this nomad sovereign. The exterior of the chateau is far from resembling the sumptuous palaces of the Tatar Khans of Crimea, which must have been phenomenal back in the day. But within there is the same luxury, the same display of riches gained by barbarian valor, or probably created from ancient different traditions. Around this princely retreat, two streams meander among abrupt masses of rocks, piled upon each other in wild confusion. The road which conducts to it, almost impassable by a conformation of the ground, partly the result of a convulsion of nature, partly of human art, would be inaccessible and impracticable for anyone but an Avarian. So again, they manipulated the land. They did this. They've created such a place that can really almost only be accessed by them because they're so skilled. They have such an advantage, and they've probably been here doing this kind of stuff since the dawn of time. And again, it reminds me of the Inca and things like that, where they could do things all the way up to Machu Picchu and run hundreds of miles a day through the woods that nobody else could follow. And, it's one of those things. Again, people that are from a place know things more often, and aliens don't tend to know things, which gives the advantage to the originators and the ancestors, which, again, I believe was these people and not the invading Russians and brutal Russians, even though These ones are called the barbarians. Backwards world. So here we go. On this elevated plateau, the Russian prisoners were exposed. All attempts at flight were rendered useless by the extreme precautions which had been taken, the genius of these ancient ones. Every prisoner, his hands strongly tied behind his back, had besides a rope with a running knot around his neck, such as the Tartars employ in taking wild horses, in which they call arcan, A-R-C-A-N. The extremity of each rope was fastened to a common center, a large wooden stake firmly fixed in the ground. 50 Avarians armed with guns and yatagans constantly watched them, whilst at all hours of the day the members of the tribe walked through their ranks, eyeing the unhappy men with a restless curiosity, seeking to recognize their faces and addressing insidious questions to them, both in the Tartar idiom and in the Russian tongue. The Khan and the 6 ancients of the tribe, who composed the tribunal, sat in the royal chateau. These judges are 7 in number because of the 7 summits of white snowy mains of the mountains of Elbrus, which the tribe of the Avarians consider as the seat of the divinities who judge them after death. Intense. And again, I love that. I love when these things, and again, this is a sentence describing an entire religion, and this is a sentence written by other people who aren't of this and who are observing these people. But again, these judges are 7 in number because of the 7 summits or white snowy mains of the mountains of Elbrus, which the tribe of the Avarians consider as the seat of the divinities who judge them after death. So there's just this connection between the spiritual world and the reality, and I think that connection existed. I think it was all one at one point, and they may not have been separated in the distant past, and that's where a lot of these stories, I think, come from. And to pass them off as just pure myth and fantasy is not doing justice to the way the ancient world was and the magic that happened within it. At the end of 7 days passed in these preliminary formalities, an Avarian struck 3 times on the silver cymbals which are continually suspended before the dwelling of the Khan. The gray dawn was just beginning to pierce the thick foliage of the mighty forest of oaks and pines which surrounded the clear space. At the signal, Mendli Khan and the 6 ancients of the tribe emerged from the hut. The Avarians are neither Mohammedans nor Christians. Their religion, if the term may be properly applied to their singular pagan belief, consists in attributing an ephemeral but supernatural power to the first object of nature, which they perceive at the beginning of each day. The divinity which they thus create for themselves and to whom they accord a blind devotion exercises his authority during 24 hours and is replaced the next day by another selection in the same fortuitous manner. And I really like this belief a lot because I have a habit that I've always had of waking up and going to sleep with a smile. I make sure every day that I go to sleep and I wake up happy, unbelievably happy. And the first thing is almost like as if you're being watched by a divine force, because I do believe life is perfect and this world is perfect. And so I can mesh with this where you see the first thing of the day, something natural, something maybe out of place, and that is the representation of God, almost keeping you on the right path, showing you that everything's going to be all right, kind of encouraging you and comforting you by this belief. And then that watches over you all day, and then the next day it appears, this power, this supreme power, takes the form of another thing, and therefore that day becomes different and beautiful and amazing and perfect as well. So I'm not sure if that's what they were really thinking, but either way, I like it, and it meshes with my vibe and mentality as well. On going out of the tent, the Khan and his old men raised their eyes towards heaven, and perceiving a raven, as it were, swimming and bathing in the liquid ether, always right, he exclaimed, "The raven is God." Loud cries of adoration and rejoicing were immediately heard from all who surrounded him. So that's almost like all of these people, all of them are acknowledging this God and this symbol of divinity right at the same time. So the power in that is really amazing. And then they're all going to kind of go and believe and have that follow, and then tomorrow a new thing will take its place. But that they were all there at that moment to see the raven is quite impressive and synchronistic, I think. A carpet was then spread upon the ground in the form of a horseshoe. The judges seated themselves upon it cross-legged after the Turkish fashion, and the cymbals resounded for some minutes through the echoing forest. When the noise had ceased, upon a signal given by the Khan, 3 accusers presented themselves. But I want to go back to that about the cross-legged being the Turkish fashion, because here in America, when you're a kid, that's the Native American style or Indian style. And if that is kind of the old American way, that's kind kind of what they're assuming, and they're teaching us, oh, this is the way the old Native Americans used to sit, and they listen to their stories, etc. But if that's truly the Turkish fashion, which could be the Tartarian in general fashion, then maybe that means another sign that they were in America as well, and they just changed the word. That's all they have to do, is change a word, and they can dupe generations of people. That's probably what they do all the time. So here we go. I have discovered that 5 of the prisoners are Kabardians, Circassians of the plain, said Ali Khartan, one of the boldest Avarian horsemen, advancing in the midst of the circle. These miserable deserters have served in the ranks of the Russian troops. They are still clothed in the uniform of the soldier slaves. I accuse them of treachery, for they have borne arms against their brethren. I demand a sentence of death upon them. The second accuser, Mohammed Bey, then appeared. I ask the punishment of a Russian officer, said he, who is in the number of the prisoners. This officer, whose name is Fint Mayer, came during the past year into our mountains and presented himself to us as a deserter. We received him with pity because we thought him unfortunate. He slept under our tents, he ate our rice, he drank our kurni, and afterwards returned among his own people to report what he had learned of our strength and of our projects. The officer, Fint Mayer, is a Russian spy. I demand his life in reparation of his cowardly and odious conduct. Treason is the same punishment all throughout time, and it needs to come to America quick. Errol Leng, the third accuser, declared that another officer, Nicholas Bukhanov, had cheated him at the fair of Vladikaukasus in paying him coin containing alloy for the price of 2 horses which he had sold to him. It is the custom of the Circassians and Avarians in the time of war to go to Vladikaukasus for the purpose of trading with the Russians, ready to take arms again as soon as the fair has terminated. We have heard the accusations of Ali Khartan, Mohammed Bey, and Errol Leng with an impartial ear, said Mendli Khan, rising from his seat. Let the accused be brought hither, and we swear by the Raven, the god of this day, neither to sit down nor to take repose until justice be done to the accused or to the accusers. The 5 Kabardians taken prisoners in the Russian troops first appeared. They acknowledged their Circassian origin, but severally alleged for excuse that they had been forced and constrained by the Muscovite authorities to enter and remain in the service of the emperor. The imprisoned bird flies towards his native forest as soon as the door of the cage is open, said the Khan. The Kabardians were silent, but one of them said, after some moments of hesitation, "We have not fought against our brethren." "Did you kill one Russian slave?" interrupted the Khan. "No, never," replied the Kabardian with a sigh. Silence spread over the assembly. The judges appeared to consult together, and the crowd slowly retreated so as not to disturb their deliberations. 3 taps on the cymbals was the signal of their result, and Mendli Khan pronounced the following sentence: "May the Raven be praised who lends his wisdom to the administration of justice. The wolves do not attack their brother wolves. Circassians ought not to fight Circassians. That man is a traitor who fights against his free brethren in the cause of slavery. Let our yatagans fall upon the heads of the Muscovites like hail upon a field predestined to destruction, and let them disappear from before us as the smoke which rises from our hearts. But at the same time let our justice strike down traitors as with a thunderbolt. Death to the traitors. Their treachery shall be punished with impalement." Wow. Again, so they don't take treason very lightly. And this actually reminded me of, I'm not sure, but when they were talking about the yatagans, I think those might be arrows. And Avarians, actually, I wonder if it sounds familiar to a Final Fantasy game. I don't know if any of you out there can confer that, but I feel like there was an arrow or a person that was an Avarian in maybe Final Fantasy 2 or 3. I don't know. Total sidetrack. But either way, going to keep going for the rest of the punishments. These guys, and again, traitors, that's the way it is. That's the way it has to be to run a successful country. You have to have traitors fear doing pretty much what the worst thing you can do. So you have to set an example. These Khans know what to do. So, death to the traitors, their treachery shall be punished with impalement. The Avarians were led off, evincing the most frightful despair. Yeah, that would not be good. The officer, Fint Mayer, was then brought before the tribunal, but he refused to reply to any of the questions addressed to him by the judges, indicating by his gestures that he understood nothing of the language of the country. Muhammad Bey, his accuser, then asked the privilege of producing witnesses. Several came forward and testified in the most positive manner that they perfectly remembered the person of the officer. The Khan then pronounced the sentence, which condemned him to have his eyes torn from their orbits, because, said he, by their assistance he found the road into our country; then to have his legs amputated, because they had transported him thither; then to have his ears filled with melted lead, because they had listened to the words of the Avarians; then to have his tongue cut out, because he had employed it in order to report to his superiors what he had seen and heard; and finally to be put to death by impalement. And again, this sounds like people repercussion on people that they call the Russians the slave drivers and whatnot. And so they're retaliating against people that what I see as ruining their world, people that destroyed their peace, that destroyed their sense of calm, and are bringing upon just a nightmare upon them. And they want to make an example really powerfully. And these sentences will do it. On hearing this barbarous sentence, the unhappy officer lost the stoicism which he had preserved until then, and his resolution abandoned him. He broke forth into menaces and imprecations, and in his frenzied despair denounced, in the Kabardian tongue, a terrible retribution upon his judges for the insult done to the emperor in his person. "Our justice is just," said the Khan. Then, embracing Muhammad Bey with tenderness, he added, damn it, that line is cut off. It is folded. It says, "I'm something, blah, 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 spy. Let him scold, his tongue will soon be stiffened by the rod of impalement." So yeah, the King Khan was not feeling it at all. The other officer, whom Arrow Leng accused of having given him alloyed money in payment, appeared the last before these terrible judges. "The gold which I paid for the horses," said he, "is the same which the paymaster of our detachment had given me a few days before as a portion of my pay. If it was not good, as my accuser declares, the blame cannot justly be laid upon me, and you can easily convince yourselves that the coin circulates freely in all the states of my august master, the emperor." "Do you speak the truth?" demanded the Khan, casting a penetrating glance on the officer, who preserved a firm and steady countenance. "I speak the truth," said Bucanoff. "I appeal to St. Nicholas and the Holy Virgin. An officer who is worthy to bear a sword will not seek to save his life by a lie." "I suspend the sentence to be pronounced against you," said the Khan, "until the time, may it speedily come, when your emperor shall fall into our hands. If you speak the truth, you shall then be liberated, and your emperor shall be punished. If you lie, you shall be punished, and we will reckon with your emperor, not as enemies, but as judges." The judgment of the prisoners having thus terminated, the cymbals again resounded with a great noise. So this guy is just, he's kind of, in their justice system, they're putting the emperor on the same level as this guy, which is really cool, because that's the way it should be. You shouldn't be given a special treatment of justice, like in this country, when certain people, an entire massive group of evil people, can't be prosecuted, but the good people can. It's kind of sick. So these guys knew it. All this stuff was obvious to the ancient people, but not today, somehow. So the judges were then served with a meal composed of pilum, boiled mutton, and kumyo, a drink made of mare's milk. The lieutenants of the Khan proceeded to a division of the booty and of the remaining prisoners, and the unhappy wretches condemned to death were delivered to the executioners for immediate execution. 4 days after this horrible execution, the Russian sentinels placed at the advanced posts of the line of Terek were horrified at the dawn of day at perceiving 6 trees despoiled of their bark and reddened with blood, which had been planted in front of their post during the night by the ferocious Avarians, and to which were still attached the dead bodies of their 6 victims, disfigured by the convulsions of the frightful torture of impalement. Wow. So as if that wasn't at the very end, they had to stick it even further by sneaking around in that area of nature where only they are masters, and they strung up the bodies of the victims and the prisoners captured right in front of their own people against a tree. Now that is barbarous and brutal. But again, is it deserved? What did these other people do, and what have they done to deserve such treatment in a time of war and battle like this? And again, I don't see the Russian people as being the innocent ones, and at all, because the Avarians are not around anymore, and they didn't conquer the world. They haven't done as much as much kind of devastation as the others. So while the article and the author of the article kind of places the blame on them as being the barbarous, crazy, wild ones, I kind of see it the other way around. And I miss these beautiful ancient people who treated justice in this beautiful way. And imagine going to the woods, a random woods retreat, and having this ceremony instead of our judges and courts and all that nonsense. So again, I'm coming at this blind and just tossing theories out there at you guys and whatever comes to mind, but share your comments below. Let me know if you've ever heard of the Avarians or what you think of all of this. And I love hearing from all you guys. You all know the best stuff, and you add to my collection of knowledge that together we can keep expanding and finding more and more interesting little links in the chain of our story, our human history, which has 100% been robbed from us, manipulated, mutated, decimated, destroyed, ravaged, all kinds of different things. So we need to get it back, because we know deep down inside what this world could be, can be, and once was before the evil set in and made everything go wild. I wish we could take it back to that place, a golden age of beauty, creativity, and together, unity. But we got a lot of work to do. So bless you all from artofdino.com and saveearth.us. I hope you enjoyed this. Please share it and spread it around, and definitely comment below. Bless you all.